Today is the 13th of July and we are here at Hampstead Garden Suburb at Lunch and Learn, the last of this term. And today we're going to be, the learning we're going to do today is going to be Le'ilui Nishmas Lella Yamin Yosef, whose yahrzeit is tonight. And may the neshama of Yonah Bat Gershom, it's her first yahrzeit, may she have an aliyah. And obviously my sister grew up in your house, and on the way here she said to me that your mother was a most remarkable, most welcoming woman. And may her neshama have an aliyah. And all I know is that I know some of you, and I know that you're involved in the community, and I feel that she will be looking down on you and being so proud of you and all your achievements and your children's achievements and your grandchildren's achievements for some of you. So now we're going to ask Deborah to say a few words. One sec.
So this is in memory of our mother, Lella Yosef. She was born in Italy, Milano, and comes from the destruction of the Second Temple, Roman times. Her father was originally from Rome, born in the ghetto of Rome. And when we moved here in the late 70s, she didn't speak any English, had 5 small children, but just got on with it, and that's my mom's personality. She just made the best of whatever was thrown at her. She very resilient, very strong, very well respected as well, always happy. Everything that, whenever we hear people coming up to us, they always said my mom had a beautiful smile. And she always made everybody feel extremely welcome. She made everybody feel, but in a very modest way. And yes, we miss her very much. And
an amazing cook.
An amazing cook.
An amazing cook.
Please God, her aliyah, her neshama will have an aliyah.
Okay, this week's Parsha is Parshas Balak, and I'm going to focus on something that's going to be hard to speak about, which is why I'm not going to speak a lot about it, and that is at the end of the Parsha, we have this very strange story about 2 unnamed individuals who we found out later are Cozbi and Zimri, and they are, one is a Midyanite princess, royalty, and the other one is a tribal leader of the Jewish nation, and they are having some sort of they are basically having sexual intercourse in front of other people, or in a situation where other people can witness it, and that is completely not allowed. Now, what I'm not going to focus on is Pinchas, who comes along and does something very heroic. But I struggle with it, even though the rabbis say and that Hashem rewards him. I see it as vigilante justice, and I find that quite troubling. So I can't focus on that, even though the rabbis have got a lot of ideas how we can deal with it. That's not, even though that's the main part. That is a main part of the story, but I will be not discussing that. I find the whole thing quite troubling, and Hashem himself gives Pinchas the reward of becoming a Kohen, and he has Bris Shalom, the covenant of peace. Before we get to the focus of today, which is the story of Zimri and Cozbi, I'd like to look at the beginning of the Parsha, and it's not numbered on your handout. I just couldn't get the number in. It was very difficult. I don't know why. Okay, so it starts with source, the unnumbered source, which is really source number 1, but number 1 comes in a minute, okay? The beginning of the Parsha is we have the king of Balak. Vayar Balak ben Sippor, es kol asher asa Yisrael le'amori. There's a king, his name's Balak, and he is the king of Moav. And he's very troubled by what we can only term I don't like saying this, but the Jewish problem. This is an age-old problem where we've got Jews, Israelites, they're living near us. This is a problem, how are we going to handle it? Vayago Moav mipnei ha'om ma'od ki ravhu. Moav was alarmed because there were numerous Israelites nearby. Vayakotz Moav mipnei bnei Israel, and Moav dreaded the Israelites. They were like nervous, and it was a problem. Vayomer melech Moav el ziknei Midyan. And Moav said to the elders of Midyan, and this is what he says: now this nation will lick clean all that is around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field. Now this is, if you want to see any like ancient evidence for caricatures of making Jews look like animals and making people treat them like vermin, portray them as vermin. He actually says these words: they are like an ox licking up the grass of the field. And Balak was the king of Moav at that time. We're up to Pasuk Hey, right? So he sent messengers to Bilam ben Ba'or, and he says to Bilam, these people came out of Egypt, we're not so happy. Verse 6, come and put a curse on them for me because they're too numerous for me. And then in verse 7, Vayelchu ziknei Moav v'ziknei Midyan. And the elders of Moav and the elders of Midyan go together with their maybe divination or their magic in their hand. Vayavo el Bilam vayadabru elov divrei Balak. And they go and have a discussion with the king of. Well, they go and speak to Bilam, and they're saying, "This is our problem. Can you give us a solution? Can you curse the children of Israel because we have got this problem? There are too many, and they are coming into the land." And Bilam says, "Vayomer ches alehem linu po halayla." Why don't you just stay here overnight? Let me think about it. Give me a bit of time to think about it. I'm going to stay overnight. V'hashivosi eschem davar ka'asher yedaber Hashem elai, and I'll get back to you when Hashem's told me what I should do. Vayeshvu sorei Moav in Bilam. So the elders or the dignitaries or the princes of Moav stayed with Bilam. Now, what I'd like to focus on this story, the whole story is quite complicated, is what is going on with Midyan? Where is Midyan in this story? Because Balak is the king of Moav, and Moav has got a problem with the Jewish nation. Why does it say Moav in verse 4, Moav said to the elders of Midyan? Do you know how terrible our life is? We've got these awful Israelites living nearby. And then when they go to Bilam, it says, Vayelchu ziknei Moav v'ziknei Midyan. And the elders of Midyan and the elders of Moav go together to Bilam. When it gets to verse 8, we don't hear any more mention of people from Midyan anymore. Can everyone see that in the text? Okay? Firstly, why is Midyan involved in this dispute? Now, if you look at the very last page of the handout, I know it's very small, but I couldn't fit everything in, but you could Google it yourself. I got this map. It's the Illustrated Atlas of Jewish Civilization. It's a book, 2003. But basically, if you look at the picture, Midyan is just above the words which says the Illustrated Atlas of Jewish Civilization. There's little red lines, and then Midyan is quite low down there. And Moav is quite high up there, but you can see that Edom is sort of there, and the land of Israel, which is Canaan, is much higher. So why is Midyan involved in that dispute? And by the way, you should just note that I tried, if you Google where is Midyan, it comes up at different places, lots of different versions of exactly where Midyan is. And there is this idea that perhaps the Midianites didn't really have a land, even though they refer to it as the land of Midyan. If we cast our minds back to the story of Joseph being sold by Ishmaelite traders, somehow Midianites were also there. And according to some opinions, there is this idea that perhaps the Midianites were of no fixed abode, and they sort of Bedouins, Gypsies. Right? But then, why are they getting involved in a territorial dispute? Right? Because the dispute is the Israelites are around. There's too many of them. We don't want them near us. What are they doing in the dispute? Why are they getting involved with Balak? If they don't even live nearby, the Israelites are not bothering them. They live way down south or maybe nowhere. Maybe they sort of hang around, But I think that I did see somebody write that maybe they are a bit like something like ISIS, which is like an unidentified group of people who are, in inverted commas, of no fixed abode, but they are, dare I say the word, happy to be involved in terrorist activities and generally cause trouble whenever they don't want, whenever they've got a cause célèbre, whenever they've got something they want to deal with, they're there, they'll show up. And there's different examples of where they show up in Tanakh. But I just thought I'd mention that to you. If you're interested more about that, there's lots to read about it. And you can Google where is the land of Midyan, and you'll see on different maps. I got 4 maps, and it's not really all in the same place. So just keep that information at the back of your head and ask yourself, why do they appear in the story? Why do they disappear? But then they show up at the end of the Sedra. And before I talk about the end of the Seder, which is the story about Cozbi and Zimri, the question is, Moav and Midyan in Parshas, we understand that they were actually arch enemies. So why did they call Midyan to come and get involved in a territorial dispute? So it's not on your sheet. The Das Sakanim in Bamidbar, Perek Kaf Beis Zion, says there was never peaceful relationships between Moav and Midyan, but now they both felt in some ways threatened by the Israelites. So they, like dogs, when they're afraid of wolves, they act together in unison. And that is why Midyan came to Moav's aid. Rashi says, who's the leader of the Jewish people? It's none other than Moshe. Who's got the most experience, apart from the Egyptians, about telling us anything about Moshe? And the answer is Midyan, because Moshe, according to some opinions, was perhaps the king of Midyan. He lived in Midyan when he ran away from Pharaoh. And he lived in Midyan, and he married Zipporah, who was the daughter of Yisro, Kohen Midyan. So perhaps, according to Rashi, they came along, Moav said to them, hey, you are our local expert in how to deal with the Jewish problem because you are familiar with Moshe, and perhaps could you give us some advice? And perhaps that's why they showed up. So why do they slink out in verse 8? Why does Moav slink out in verse 8? Again, it's not on your sheet, but Rashi tells us that Moav says Moshe is a man of words. His power is his words. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about when the Egyptian was killed, and the actual words in the Torah are Halahargeni ata omer. Are you saying you want to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And I said there's a midrash which says that Moshe killed the Egyptian by pronouncing the name of Hashem. So they felt they needed Midyan to give them a bit of information. How can we deal with Moshe and his people? And Midyan said, you need to fight him not by the sword, but by the mouth. You have to curse him. And the person you need to go to, the address is Bilam. Okay, go to Bilam and he will help you. So when Moav was called Bilam to help them, once he said, Lini po halayla, let me sleep on it, they were like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. We're out of here. We'll find our next mission that we're going to do. So that's what Rashi tells us. It says, once he said, stay here the night, they told themselves there's no hope in him. We've got no, ein bo tikva. He's not going to do anything for us. And that's why the next posuk, all the people from Midyan slink out of the picture. Now, with that background, we're going to talk about the story. And there's very little written about the story, and not a lot of detail, and a lot of it is midrash, and there's so much to say, and definitely we're not going to be able to say all of it, and I'll come back next year and finish it off maybe. And also, half the story is in Balak, and then it carries on in the next Sedra in Pinchas. So here's the story. Okay, so it's source 1 on your sheet, which is really source 2, but we're going to carry on with the numbering according to 1. Okay. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim, and Israel settled or dwelt in Shittim. Vayachel ha'am liznos es benos Moav, and the people profaned themselves by being immoral with the daughters of Moav. Keep remembering where it says Moav and where it says Midyan. Vatikrena ha'om lezivche Elohehem, and the people invited them to sacrifice to their God. There is this idea that the women sort of seduced the Israelite men, and then they said, right, let's spend the evening together, and then they whipped out their idols and said, you want to be with me? Here's my idol, bow down to it, or whatever exactly happened there, I don't know. Vayochal ha'om vayishtachavu lelohehem. And the people partook and they worshipped and they bowed down to the gods of the others. Vayitzomer Yisrael leBaal Pa'ar, and Israel became attached to Baal Pa'ar, which is the name of this idol that they were serving. Vayicha af Hashem, and the anger of God was kindled. Just a complete side note, how does God have anger? He doesn't have a nose, he doesn't have anger, he doesn't have emotions, not for the subject for today. Vayicha af Hashem b'Yisrael. source Dalad, okay? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, Kach kol roshei ha'am, take all the leaders of the people, v'hoka osom, and hang them, la Hashem neged Hashemesh, hang them out to dry in the sun, vayoshov charon af Hashem Yisrael, that the wrath should be turned, Hashem's wrath should be turned away from Israel. Vayomer Moshe el Shoftei Yisrael. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, perhaps there was some sort of, there is an idea that they convened a Beth Din. They sort of made like a judging panel. Hirgu ish anashov hanitz modim leval pa'ar. Each of you has to slay the people, you have to kill the people who've attached themselves to Baal Pa'ar. Very, very strange story. I'm sure you'll all be Googling this and reading it in the Torah because it's just so strange. V'hinei, and behold, Ish mibnei Yisrael ba'ah. A certain man from the children of Israel. Ish always means a man of importance if we don't have his name, for example, in the Megillah. Ish Yehudi hayo b'Shushan harbira. Ish means an important man. There's lots of words, Ish, Odom, Enosh. If we say Ish without the name of somebody, we know it's a man of importance. V'hinei Ish mibnei Yisrael ba'or, and a certain man from an Israelite came, vayakrev el echov, and he drew near to his brothers, el hamidyonis, to the Midianites. I thought this story was about Moav, because at the beginning of this story, let's look at Bamidbar Kaf Hey Aleph, the first line of source 1, El Benos Moav. Why have we suddenly got a Midianite back in the story? Le'enei Moshe o le'enei kol adas b'nei Israel. And he did this, whatever he did, with this Midianite woman, and we spoke about names once before for the people who remember. They're both not named, but they get named in the next parsha. And he's doing whatever he's doing in front of the eyes of the whole of the children of Israel. V'hema bochim, and they were crying. Who's crying? We'll try and get there today. Pesach Ohel Moed, opposite the entrance of the tents of meeting. Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. And Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the high priest, the priest. And he saw, what did he see? He saw what was going on, perhaps. Vayokom, and he got up, mitoch ha'eda, and he got up from in the midst of the congregation. Vayikach romach biyodo, and he took a spear in his hands. P.S. Where's Moshe? He's in the story. Why is he not doing anything? Vayovo acha ish Yisrael el hakuba, and he followed the Israelite man into the chamber. Vayikod eshnehem, and he stabbed, or he put the spear through them. Es ish ve'es isha ve'es el kuvsa, and he pushed his spear through their belly. Vate'otzeh hamagefa me'al b'nei Israel, and the plague stopped from amongst the children of Israel. Just as a side note, did we see the plague start? No. Vayihiyu hamesim b'magefa arba'a ve'esrim aleph. And those who died in the plague were 24,000. Hollywood blockbuster, Pinchas. In fact, right at the bottom here, I also sent you a lovely picture, which is a picture, like a painting from Jules van Vinger. I don't know how you call his name. A painting. There are loads. If you see art, there's loads of artistic pictures of portrayals of what exactly went on. As you can imagine, it's a very fascinating story. And I told you the one thing I find most troubling is killing someone else. So the Chazal tell us he did the right thing. Hashem tells us, because you acted in this way, it's amazing. But I would like to read... Yeah, Madeline?
Can I point to...
Yes?
Pasuk Daled that you just read.
Yeah.
In mitigation of the vigilante story, Hashem says to Moshe, that they should take all the
Perpetrators.
and you're translating hoka as hang, but it's very closely related to coat with a tuff, to pierce, as we have.
There are lots of opinions
So,
as to, thank you, Madeline.
There is an opinion that what he did was what everybody was so shocked, including Moshe Rabbeinu, that they felt intimidated by the whole thing and they were afraid to do anything. And it was Pinchas who actually had the courage to do what Hashem had commanded previously.
Hashem did say, but he said, kill all the people. There were all the people who were involved in this
The heads,
shenanigans.
the important people who were involved in the shenanigans, and the one who did it, who did anything.
And Pinchas was heavily praised for it. I found one source for the people who want to look at it, which says Pinchas didn't do the right thing, but we're never going to get to source 18 today, I can tell you, because it's already half past. But for those who want to read it, it's the Ishbitzer Meir Shaloach, so you can read it. No, I'm all right. It's okay. Yeah, it's very cold. Oh, I thought you said it. I thought you were saying it's very hot. So swap seats. Misha, why don't you go sit there?
Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm just worried about them.
Okay. So the first thing I want to say is in Parshas Pinchas is where Yehoshua gets Yehoshua is chosen as the next leader, and the emeritus chief rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs wrote in 2012 in a piece called Pinchas the Zealot in his Covenant and Conversation. He says, in general, we are commanded to walk in Hashem's ways and imitate his attributes. Just as he is merciful and compassionate, so we have to be merciful and compassionate. That is not, however, the case when it comes to executing punishment or vengeance. Hashem knows all may execute sentence without a trial. Hashem who knows all, may execute a sentence without a trial, but we human beings may not. Now for Pinchas, his behavior was ratified by Hashem, and they have prophecy and things like that. There are forms of justice that are God's domain and not ours. It's not on the sheet, but I'll give you the quote if you want to read it later.
But somebody is planning to commit a murder. And I'm thinking of Israel, for instance, in Iran. Somebody who's involved with a nuclear program, they go out and they kill him before he can do any damage to Israel. So are they not...
Or assassination.
Yeah. So where's the due process of law? Have they, in Israel, had a secret...
There is one concept, I don't know enough about it, but there is one concept which is called rodef. If someone is trying to kill you, in Jewish law, you're allowed to kill them because they're coming to kill you. And in fact, it's very technical, but Zimri, who was the man who Pinchas killed, could have tried to kill Pinchas first because Pinchas came to kill him. Which is, it's just too much to talk about in one talk today.
I thought that Pinchas was punished for doing...
How was he punished?
I don't know, there was like that he actually did something wrong.
Well, the Ishbitzer says that he did something wrong. That's why I said it's number 18 on the source sheet, but we're never going to get there today. But that is what I'm saying. So what I'd like to just say is, but Jonathan Sachs goes along the line of saying maybe this isn't the ideal thing. If you were asking about rodef, so that concept of rodef, if someone comes to kill you, you can kill them, is used in halacha when they talk about if, God forbid, if a woman has a fetus within her, that fetus, for whatever reason, is endangering her life, that is how they get around it and say that you would have to terminate the fetus's life because that fetus effectively is trying to come and kill the woman. In inverted commas. That's how they get around it. Otherwise, we value life. Life is very sacred above all. So the chief, Jonathan Sachs carries on saying, the zealot who takes the law into his own hands is embarking on a course of action fraught with moral danger. Only the most holy may do so. Only once in a lifetime, and only in the most dire circumstances, when the nation is at risk, when there is nothing else to be done, and when there's no one else to do it. Even then, were the zealot to ask permission from a court, he would be denied it. So there is a concept which is called kanoim pogimba, which according to the understanding of the rabbis is Moshe had taught this, Moshe had somehow forgotten it, and Pinchas remembered it. Now, Kanoim Pogimbo means a zealot has to sort of deal with it there and then. If you're a zealot and you're like, I can't take this is so bad, I've got to deal with it, you can't stop and say, if you stop and say, sorry, do you mind, can I do that? Then you're not a zealot anymore, and therefore you can't do it. So it's a very, very complicated subject. I just want to carry on telling what Lord Jonathan Sachs says. Pinchas gave his name to the Parsha in which Moshe asks Hashem to appoint a successor. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, the Kotzker Rebbe who passed away in 1859, asks why Pinchas, who is the hero of the hour, was not appointed the leader. He was the main man. He'd saved the whole nation. He'd stopped the plague. His answer is, pardon me?
Could it be because he got angry, too angry?
Well, he's not, it is about that. It says, a person who's a zealot cannot be the leader. You cannot be that. Zealots are good, like we spoke about being a Nazir is good, but the whole nation can't. We can't all be zealots, others will go around walking around with spears killing people. A leader requires patience, forbearance, and respect for due process. The zealots besieged Jerusalem in the last days of the Second Temple, and they played a significant part in the city's destruction. They were more intent on fighting one another than the Romans outside the city wall. And unfortunately, this was written, 10 years ago, or you can read it, it's on Covenant Conversation. And it's like, a leader can't be a zealot. We need zealots, we need people who want to stand up for things, but you can't be the leader. You need to be a bit more of a calm personality. Right, so why did Pinchas get involved? And before we speak about that, I'm just going to speak very briefly about Moav and Midyan. So it's source 2 on your sheet. Who is Moav and who is Midyan? They are countries, but they are countries that are named, or nations, but they are named after people. Anybody want to volunteer who they think, remember from primary school if they ever learnt it? Moav. Eden, come on, I was your teacher once. You can always cheat by looking at source 2.
Yeah, no, she knows, but she's shy.
Okay, she knows that. Okay. Moav was the product of an incestuous relationship between Lot, who's Abraham's nephew, and his daughters. So they thought that it was an apocalypse, they thought it was the end of the world, and therefore they thought my father's the only man alive, and therefore they called their sons Moav, Me'avi, from my father, and Ammon, B'nai Ami, the son of my people. Topic for another whole discussion. But they were in a cave, they thought there was no one else left, all they could see around them was destruction. That is who Moav is, so related to Abraham. Midyan is actually the son of Abraham. And that's like, people sort of forget this, because it's like written in a tiny little posuk. So after Sarah died, Abraham married somebody called Keturah, who the Midrash identifies as Sarah. Source 3, Bereshit, as Hagar, I'm sorry, thank you, I'm happy you're all listening, okay, I did it on purpose, yeah, okay, so Vayosef Abraham, Vayikach Isha Shmo Keturah, this is source 3, Vateled Lo, and had all these children, had Zimron, Yokshan, Medan, and Midyan. So Midyan actually is our cousin, because he's one of Abraham's other children from a second marriage. What is fascinating is people might be familiar with the fact that for Moav, we are not allowed to marry a Moabite. Okay, so in Devorim, source 4 on your sheet, Lo Yovo Ammoni Umoavi Bikal Hashem, we are told that an Ammonite and a Moabite cannot marry into the Jewish nation, and that is most famous from Ruth, because Ruth was a Moabite, and the Chazal at that time was saying, the rabbi said, it doesn't apply to the women. It only applies to the men, and that is why Boaz was entitled to marry Ruth. We're doing a whole cycle of the whole year in this year today. Yeah, Gabriella.
Can I just ask you, is there any present day reference to what would be an Ammonite or a Moabite, or is it just somebody from an Arab nation?
We don't know, and it's not necessarily. I don't know if it's an Arab nation. I'm not sure. We don't know who's an Ammonite and a Moabite. We don't know. We don't know who Amalek is. We have a mitzvah to kill Amalek. We don't know who Amalek is either. We don't know who anyone is. And then, it's difficult. So what the Torah says, you cannot allow an Ammonite or Moabite to marry into, they can convert, they can't marry in, even in the 10th generation, because, source 4, al davar asher lo kidmu eschem balechem uvamayim, because they never gave you food and water when you left Egypt, and because they hired Bilam ben Ba'ar to curse you. But you'd think, they're a bit mean. They didn't let us walk through the desert, even though we agreed to pay for water with them, and even though when we had the well of Miriam with us, we didn't need their water. They didn't even let us walk through. We had to go the long way around. But the Torah tells us in Devorim Perek Beis, source 5 on your sheet, Al totsar es Moav, va'al tis gar bam milchama. Don't start up, don't fight, don't harass or provoke the Moabites. You will never inherit their land. That is the land of Lot and his family, and you can actually forget about it. Don't get into trouble with Moav. Whoever Moav is, they can't marry in, but don't start with them. However, very soon after the story of Cozbi and Zimri, that's in chapter 25, chapter 31, we've got a whole tirade against Midyan.
The land of Moab is what, present-day Jordan?
It's, we'll look at the map. It's just over there. I don't know where it'll be.
Present-day Jordan? I can't see where that is. Oh no, it's further.
No, I think it's more to the right.
Syria. It's further.
No, because I think it's not so north. I don't know. It's probably like Iran.
No, it can't be Iran. It's further north. No, this is.
Where's Mom?
Moav is here. Look,
I can't see the map.
that's where Moav is. It's slightly to the right
So that is
of
Jordan.
Israel.
It's
So,
Jordan.
but all I'm thinking about is Eilat. You know
No,
what I mean?
Elat is down there. Elat is where Midyan is. It's Jordan. It's Jordan or going towards Syria.
It must be that the river Jordan is in between, because they Arvos Moav, Al Yad Yericho,
It's Jordan.
Yad Yarden Yericho.
I think it's Jordan.
We don't know who the people are. We just don't know who they are. Yes.
Had Moav not brought this to the attention
Yeah.
of Moshe,
Yeah.
then the peoples would have continued to assimilate. So, in a sense, it was just another Sodom and Gomorrah. It was another situation like that. So, had they not, asked for a guidance on how to deal with this situation, then these people were continuing to sin anyway. So, was it not potentially a positive thing that they asked for guidance with how to deal with the numerous population? Because these were all people who were sinning.
What do you mean? Do you mean are the people who asked for guidance how to do with the numerous population as Moav, who didn't want the Israelites to come and take over their land?
No, I understand that, but they were mingling and they were socialising and they were being seduced by, and they were beginning to assimilate to the extent.
Do you mean Moav was being assimilated?
No, that the Israelites were assimilating with the Moabites.
But it seems to be that they wanted the Israelites to marry into them and sort of like make them forget themselves, and they knew that getting them to go against Hashem would be the problem, and that would bring their downfall.
Yeah.
So they wanted their girls to. They sort of, if you look at source 2, which is source 1, yeah, it says, and they invited people to sacrifice to their god. They wanted the girls to go around and tempt them. So they knew that God would be angry with them if they joined in. Okay. Look at what is being said, how we have to treat the people from Midyan. Completely the opposite of Moav. Moav, don't touch them, even though they were nasty to you, they got Bilam to come to you, right? Nakom nikmas b'nei Israel me'es ha-Midyanim. Avenge the Israelite people on the Midianites, then you shall be gathered to people. And Moshe said, let troops be picked out from amongst you, and let them fall upon Midyan to afflict God's vengeance upon them. And you could carry on reading the whole Perek, and it says, and Moshe dispatched people, and they killed people, and Israelites took the women, and they took captives. It's kill Midyan. It's literally like Moav, no big deal. Midyan, let's absolutely kill them. Why? Why is that? And why is it that the story is told about Moav? It says the Benos Moav were trying to tempt the Israelites, but then we've got somehow the story of Cozbi and Zimri is with the Midianites. So I'm going to attempt to answer some of those questions. Okay, so I'm going to have to miss some things out. Sorry about that. Okay, we'll have to go to source 9. Source 7 very briefly. Okay, the name of the man source 7, V'shem ish Yisrael hamukeh. The name of the Israelite man was Zimri, which is not his real name. He was a prince of Shimon. V'shem ha'isha Cozbi basur. And the name of the woman was Cozbi basur. Rosh Umos, base of Midyan. Her dad was Mr. Big Shot in Midyan. He was something like he was the king. And Rashi says, why do we need to know her name? Why is she identified? Because we didn't have her identified before. Why do we need to know her name? Source 9. Lehodi acha sinoson shel Midyanim. To show you how much the Midianites hated us. Shehif kiru bas melech liznus kedei lahachtias Yisrael. They took their princess and said, you go prostitute yourself. That is like really low life. Really, really low life. And we even know that her father, later on, the Psukim in Perek Lamed Aleph, her father is called, it says here, look at the other people, the names of the kings were Evi, Rechem, Sor, Chor, Vereva. 5 kings of Midyan. There are 5 kings of Midyan. So maybe Sor is the middle one because he's like, imagine if you're sitting at a table and, you know, I'm the chairman and all the people sitting around me, he was written in the middle. But Rashi says he was one of the 5 kings of Midyan, but he's called Rosh Umos, he's called the head of the nation, but because he made himself despicable by abandoning his daughter to prostitution, it counts, he gets demoted in the list of things, okay? So we can see that people were not very happy with Midyan. And I have to choose what I'm going to say, so let me just give me a minute.
How did you see Midyan Moshe's family?
Well, Sipporah was.
Yeah, but when they got married.
Okay. So, what we'll do is we'll just move to that, and we'll have to do this another time, or just have to leave it out. So one of the overarching questions is, why did Moshe do nothing? Why did Pinchas do something? Yes, Pinchas was the zealot. According to Midrash, Moshe forgot. He had previously taught it to the people, but he himself had forgotten it. But there is this other idea, is that he himself felt very uncomfortable because you are not allowed to be in a physical relationship with a non-Jewish woman, especially not in public with witnesses. And Moshe himself was married to a Midyanite woman. Look at source, I think it's source 13. It's, let's have a look. No, source 14. Source 14 is on the back page. This is the Targum Yonasan. And this is on Posuk 25:6, which is 25:6, okay? In English is, behold, an Israelite man came and brought a Midianite woman near to his brothers in the sight of Moshe and of the whole community of Israelite community who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the Targum, which is the Aramaic translation, but he adds in lots of things to spice it up a bit, and his translation is an interpretation, and I'm not going to read the Aramaic because I don't have talents like that. A man from the children of Israel came holding a Midianite woman and brought her to his brethren. In the sight of Moshe and all the congregation of the children of Israel, he answered and said to Moshe, what is it that is wrong? Because Moshe was saying, and Hashem said to Moshe, you cannot go around sleeping with the Moabite women. So he said, what's going on? What's so bad about me having company with her? What about me hanging out with her? If you say it's forbidden, did you not yourself take a Midianite woman? And now we see the crux of the matter. Because the daughter of Yisro, which we said right at the beginning, was a Midianite, was Moshe's wife. And when Moshe heard this, he trembled and swooned. Now, there are lots of, in inverted commas, excuses for why Moshe did. Because it was before the Torah was given, and he perhaps divorced her. We learn at the end of Bahalosha, we know Miriam and Aaron spoke about the fact that they separated from each other. But the fact of the matter is, it does seem somewhat, not hypocritical, I don't want to say that word about Moshe.
Was this man going to
But maybe people were not supposed to be with a non-Jewish woman.
Is it the fact you're not supposed to be, or the fact
But perhaps you're not supposed to be, but Moshe was pre-Matan Torah, okay? The story of Balak is now taking place We're now in the 38th, 39th year after they've come out of the deserts. They've had the Torah. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that Rav Soloveitchik says Moshe was crying, because these were his babies. He had brought up this nation, the people who are now turning not yet 60, and he felt, I have not done a good job if they have done this. That's just a side point. Moshe, perhaps, and I remember, Madeline, when we spoke about the Makoshesh or the Makalel, you said, isn't it that Moshe is personally involved? Why he didn't want to get involved with the man who cursed Hashem? Do you remember I spoke about it a long time ago? I know not everybody was here. When Moshe was dealing with the man who cursed Hashem, perhaps he felt reluctant to not get involved, or he went to ask Hashem. You said it, and I've read a lot about it since then. It seems to be here, perhaps Moshe, according to some opinions, he forgot the law, but according to other opinions, maybe he didn't want to say anything because he hadn't quite tidied up his own backyard. Now, obviously, he couldn't undo the fact he'd already been married to Zipporah and he'd already been married to her, but the fact is, as a leader, what does it look like if you're going to rebuke someone for something that you yourself are guilty of? And to that end, I want to read to you something which is the Gemara in Baba Basra. Again, it's not on your sheet. I'll just say it out loud. If anybody wants to look it up, it's Baba Basra 60a. And it's the story of a rabbi who's called Rabbi Yanai. And he was like the head of the Beis Din, and people came to complain about something. It's another age-old problem, and it's someone living near me has got a tree that's hanging over and disturbing me, right? And so they came to the Rabbi Yanai and they said, listen, I can't bear it. I'm in dispute with my neighbor. His tree is hanging over, or his tree is hanging over and it's disturbing me, and I can't get past, I can't push my double buggy, whatever it is, or the shade is disturbing me. Rabbi Yanai said, let me think about it overnight. Rabbi Yanai knew full well that he himself had a tree in his garden and it was hanging over. But in his mind, he thought, how lovely. I'm letting my tree hang over because anyone who's walking past can stand under the shade. I never thought in my wildest dreams that some people might think to themselves, it's disturbance. He went home, he chopped down his tree, and the following day he came and he said, you have to chop down your tree. And the person he was dealing with said, hold on a minute, don't you, Rabbi Yanai, have a tree that's hanging over your garden fence and disturbing the people? And he says, well, the same way I've chopped mine down, the same way you should chop yours down. It never occurred to him that it would be a nuisance. But he did not want to come out and say, in front of a court case, to tell someone else what to do or how to proceed without he himself having his own affairs in order. And to that end, perhaps it was too difficult for Moshe to say anything or get up and tell off Zimri for doing something that he himself was guilty of. And I just can't help it, because there are so many occasions, especially in British politics, of people making laws, and they are making laws and they are breaking laws. I don't need to tell you, in COVID, we had Partygate. You've probably long forgotten about Dominic Cummings, who went 260 miles to Barnard Castle, and he had to go and check his eyes, really? Or Professor Neil Ferguson. These are names you've...
He resigned, but the thing with Dominic Cummings is that Boris Johnson didn't sack him, and yet he's the one who leaked everything that started this.
Okay, and let me just say, we got Professor Neil Ferguson, who he made the scientist who makes up the rules, and he breaks the rules. Then we had Catherine Calderwood, the Scottish Chief Medical Officer. We had the Liverpool Mayor's 50th birthday party in her gut. She can do that. If you're in a position of authority, you've got to be above repute. And that is perhaps one of the reasons why Moshe couldn't have got involved in this dispute. So lots and lots to say. And there is another idea, is that Moshe himself, if source 16, was punished that he forgot what to say or to do in those circumstances. And Pinchas came and said, I'll come forward and I'll do it. Because Moshe said in Devorim Aleph Yud Zayin, he said, I'm going to set up a judicial system, and anything that's too difficult for you, bring to me. V'hadavar, source 16. V'hadavar asher yiksher mikem takruvun elai ushmativ, and I will listen to it. Moshe, in inverted commas, in his humility, and he was Onov Mikol Adam, he said, anything that's too difficult, come to me. And Hashem says, that Goramar and Sanhedrin says, on account of this, Moshe was punished. You think all the difficult things come to me. There will be times in your life where you won't know the answers. And there's also the idea, which we spoke about also when we spoke about the Makalel and the Makoshesh, is the idea of Megalgalin Zachus al Yadei Zakai. Some people are worthy, and through them, they have to bring about the law. For example, the daughters of Selofchad, they were worthy, and they were the ones who, through them, the law was publicized. Through Pinchas, he was worthy, and through them, the law was publicized. I just want to finish off, as we started, thinking about the dear lady, that the community, it's a loss for the whole community, not just the immediate family. And I think, although she wasn't a leader, she didn't put herself forward to be a leader, she was a leader in her own quiet way. And I can assure you that from everything I've heard about her, she was a woman of integrity who would never have told someone to do something if she herself was, in inverted commas, lacking in that respect. And actually, I don't want to embarrass someone, but somebody here told me that just before they got married, she helped them and gave them loads of advice. And I think that is so lovely that may the neshama of Yonah bat Gershom have an aliyah, and in the Zechus V'Alain today, and may we all, none of us be zealots. I don't think it's such a great thing to be a zealot, but always stand up for what you believe in and help other people. And whatever happens, Pinchas was rewarded for this. He did the right thing according to Hashem, except you can see what the Ishbitzer says, the Mea Shaloach. And any questions?